What's that clicking noise?
It's the brakes.
It's annoying as hell.
It is.
Well, hey everybody, and welcome back to D-Ray Shop. Today, Randy and I are working on a 2019 Ranger 1000. A customer brought it in to have some service work done on it, but he also mentioned that he had a clicking noise in his rear brakes. It's real annoying. He said you just barely touch the brake pedal and the noise would go away, but just driving about 15-20 miles an hour, you could hear the steady clicking. And as these machines have gotten newer, they've quietened everything down. This particular one is one that is the North Star edition. It has the factory heat and air, the cab with the doors and everything, and everything's real quiet. So now that they've got the drivetrain noise, the motor noise, transaxle noise, and all that other stuff kind of quietened down, now you start hearing all these other little noises that nobody ever heard before because everything else was so doggone loud. But we're going to show you where this clicking noise comes from, and we'll show you a real simple fix to get that noise out of there so you won't be annoyed by that dadgum click anymore. Let's get after it. All right, we're looking at the right rear brake caliper. We've already taken the wheel off and everything. I'm gonna draw you in here a little closer, give you a little closer shot here. And what you can see here is we have the hub, the rotor, the brake caliper assembly, and these two little pieces right here, those are actually the mounting tabs for the brake pads themselves. Now Randy's gonna start turning the wheel on the other side so we can hear that noise. Now you can hear it clicking, and if you notice real careful, you can see that brake pad's walking up and down a little bit. Now of course it has to have a little bit of play on this pin so that the brake pads can float in and out as they wear and as the caliper moves. But what's going on is these calipers, since they have to float like that, the rotor, if it has just the tiniest little bit of run out in it, it's going to make those brake pads grab a little bit, and so they walk up and down on those pins right there. You can see that floating right there. And that's where that noise is coming from. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a real simple and easy fix to put a little tension on these pads, but where they'll still float like they need to, and we'll get this noise taken care of. So what we're going to do to minimize the amount of rattle that these pads have when they can float up and down on these pins is what we're going to do is we're going to add a spring in between each of the brake pads on the little pins here. Now what I've got here is just a piece of spring I found, and I just clipped it to length. I'll show you how I made these here in just a moment. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to remove the caliper. We're going to release the lock pin to allow us to scoot this mount back so we can get the brake pad off. Then we're going to add a spring on the top and bottom pin between the pads, reassemble everything, put it all back together. And what these springs are going to do is basically just hold just enough tension on these pads so that they won't walk up and down, but it'll still allow them to float back and forth. And the spring material that I'm using is small enough that even as the pads wear, it won't let it compress down to the point to where the pads can't have the proper gap in them. And that should cure our clicking problem.
Okay, first we're going to remove the Allen screw right here. Take this out, and then we'll pull the caliper itself.
Now what does that Allen screw do, Randy?
That actually keeps so the pin doesn't go back all the way out.
Oh, so your brake pads fall off. Okay, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So basically you cannot remove those pads off that caliper unless you take that Allen screw out.
Correct.
Okay.
We'll just take a number 15 millimeter wrench. Once you've removed the bolts, then you can just pull the caliper off.
And what Randy's doing is he's drawing that caliper bracket in, the one he took the screw out of, and that's going to allow that pad to slip just off of that pin, just like that. Okay. Also, I'll turn that pad around to make sure it's got good material on it. While you're doing this, go ahead and inspect your pads, and if they're worn beyond service limits, go ahead and replace them at that time. But then we're going to show you how to put these springs in.
Now we're just going to put the springs on. And then just put your brake pad back on. And now that your springs have been installed, you just put your brake caliper back on and you're good to go.
All right. As you can see, our pads are no longer floating over here clicking and making all that racket, but you can still hear it clicking though, because that caliper over there, we hadn't done it yet. So she's still clicking. So we're going to do it next. Now this is a spring that I used to make our anti-rattle springs. This was just something I had laying around the shop. You can get just miscellaneous springs and things like this at like Tractor Supply, Lowe's, different places. What I needed was just something that was slightly larger than the brake pad mounting pin, something that would just slip over it. And basically the dimensions on this, the inside diameter on this is about 12.37 millimeters, and the actual wire diameter is 0.76, just almost 8/10, just a little over 7.5 tenths of a millimeter. And it doesn't have to be real stout. All you're wanting is just enough spring tension to hold against those pads to keep them from riding up and down with the excess clearance they've got on the brake pins. So what I did is I just took this spring that I had. I mean, if you find a spring that's, you don't want a whole lot of coils on it, because as this compresses and as your pads wear, you don't want so many coils in there that it's causing it to bind up and messing up the action of your brake pads. So I just took this spring here and just stretched it out a little bit, kind of spread them out, and the actual length that I ended up with that worked for our application here was roughly 21.55, might as well say 21.5 millimeters. It doesn't have to be exactly that length. It could probably be a little shorter or a little longer, and you'd get by just fine with it. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of use that one as my pattern. Cut me another one out here of roughly the same length, and there we go. We'll install those on the other brake caliper, and then we should have that rattling, clicking pad taken care of. There we go. No more clicking. Well, all right. Well, that's going to wrap up our Polaris brake pad clicking problem. on our 1000 Polaris Ranger. That was a real simple job to do. I don't really understand why they don't come from the factory with some sort of anti-rattle springs on it. But this was a real simple fix. It's real easy to do. I've read a lot in the forums. This is where I really kind of come up with this idea. When the customer brought me this machine, this is not something I had really ran into, or maybe I'd heard it but didn't really think that it was bad enough to really worry about. But once he had told me about it, he said, man, I found all kinds of stuff about it on the internet. So I got onto these forums and got to looking, and there is just page after page of people experiencing these problems, and a lot of them was thinking that it was the Allen screw, the set screw that goes to the caliper that allows you to retract the pins on the slide mount to get the pad out. Someone was thinking, well, those need to be torqued down a little bit more. That has absolutely nothing to do with how those pads are floating in there. Motorcycles, I've been in the industry for over 30 years. A lot of motorcycles and cars and trucks, when you put brake pads on, they'll have little flat spring, like stainless springs that goes in there that holds a little tension on those pads to keep them from doing the same thing. So basically what we've done is just come up with a real quick and simple way of putting an anti-rattle spring in it. Gets that annoying clicking noise out of there so you can concentrate on enjoying your ride.
Exactly.
Or maybe sipping on a cold beer. Hey, it's all good. But anywho, appreciate y'all watching. Y'all remember to give us a couple comments in the comment section below. Also remember to like our video, subscribe, and click the notification bell so that you can get updates on our future videos. All right. Well, as always, y'all have a good one. We'll catch y'all next time around.
See ya. Just pull this in, and this will release your brakes. Drop your caliper down just a little bit. Get it back in shot. There you go. Real easy job to